Yeah, goes.
New Zealand First and also as Chair of the Select Committee to speak on the second reading, and I'm delighted to do so. As our resident builder has just said, this is one tool in the toolkit to help reduce congestion, and I've got to say that I thought that this process was Parliament at its best. This is responding to an issue which local government has asked central government for many, many years. I'm looking across the aisle there at the Honourable Phil Twyford, and he's acknowledging that when I was both the councillor and the Mayor of Wellington, I think, coming to see him and saying, actually, we want, as part of Let's Get Wellington Moving thinking, to have this tool in the toolbox, congestion pricing, to reduce the time which people spend in traffic, and also to be a revenue tool towards the Let's Get Wellington Moving. Mr Speaker, this is also very much in alignment with the Infrastructure Commission, which has encouraged us to price things so that it spreads peak demand, and that doesn't matter whether it's transport or other forms of infrastructure. The Select Committee, Mr Speaker, worked really, really well together. That we listened very carefully to the submitters, we asked good questions, and one of the things I really like is that members on both sides are asking questions, and you wouldn't know whether people were opposition or government most of the time. They're asking good questions because they want the answers. And the submitters brought thoughtful, constructive submissions to us. Mr Speaker, the other thing that we did is we proposed a number of, I think, very constructive amendments, and the good thing was that some of those amendments, we got some pushback on those amendments from, should we say, from across the road there, and we went and argued for those amendments. There were three particular ones that we argued for, and the Minister said, actually, after hearing that, I'm buying that. And I thought that was really, really good, because it showed to me what a Select Committee should be all about: hearing the evidence, hearing the submitters, giving advice and arguing for that advice, and ideally that advice being accepted. And I thought that was a really, really great thing. That's how Select Committees should work ideally, and maybe that's one of the things constitutionally we ought to be thinking about. I think also, Mr Speaker, there was very much a desire on this, because it's intended to be a long-term thing, dealing with long-term transport infrastructure, a desire for multi-partisan agreement. And again, the more that we can do that in any area, ideally without watering it down, the better that will be for New Zealand Inc. So I want to say thank you to the Minister, I want to say thank you to the Select Committee, and I want to say thanks to the officials and to all the submitters for all your input. Mr Speaker, we're already used to higher charges at times of higher demand in lots and lots of different areas, whether it's public transport, peak and off-peak fares, aviation, accommodation, energy. All of those things cost more at the times when they're in the highest demand. And time of use charging, Mr Speaker, is about trying to manage and spread that peak when there is high traffic use. So it's not about charging all the time, it's about charging at the times when there is the highest traffic use. And as I said, that's something that local government has been asking for many years, asking for the empowering legislation to put that tool, that hammer, whatever it might be, that saw in the toolkit. The reason, Mr Speaker, for time of use charging is to reduce congestion at peak times. Two ways. One is to encourage people to change the time which they travel, and the other one is to ask them to change the mode which they travel, so it's a way which induces less congestion. And doing this can enhance the efficiency of the transport network and raise economic productivity. And I can recall in introducing the second reading, the Honourable Chris Bishop's comments on the New York scheme, which he'd just been to see, which has just started, and saying this is working really, really well. And people are actually going, we didn't like the idea, but now we like it, we see what it's doing. And I often hear people say, I've got to use my vehicle, I've got to use it at peak time, so why should I have to pay for it? But the reality is that at the moment, you spend a lot of that time at peak time travelling, and you're stuck in traffic, so you're paying a cost. That cost is in your time, in your fuel, etc. So the idea of time of use charging is to encourage a few people, and it doesn't have to be a lot. It might only be 10%. If 10% of the people change the way they travel, it means that instead of being stuck in traffic, you've got relatively free-flowing traffic. So that's what this time of use charging is all about. Also, Mr Speaker, it potentially allows us to delay or to avoid expensive capital investment where that might otherwise be proposed just for the sake of relieving peak congestion. So if you've got congestion all the time, sure, you need to invest in something. You need to invest in new infrastructure. But if it's only at peak, if you can spread that peak, if you can avoid that capital cost, that is a good thing for New Zealand Inc. It's also a potential funding tool. The late Let's Get Wellington Moving, as I indicated earlier, was predicated on a funding deal which included a local share, of which part would have come from a time of use charge or a parking levy. And I've already referred to discussions that I had with the Honourable Phil Twyford at the time. I think at the time you said, Mr Twyford, that there was you didn't want another tax before the 2020 election, but it might be worth revisiting after the 2020 election. And that's, I think, where we got to.
What goes on to it stays on to it.
I also submitted, Mr Speaker, well, I'm guilty there as well. I also submitted, Mr Speaker, as Mayor of Wellington, along with Greater Wellington Regional Council on behalf of the Wellington region, to the 2021 inquiry on congestion charging, which Greg O'Connor chaired on behalf of the Auckland area, but obviously Wellington was very, very interested in this. So what did we hear, Mr Speaker, in terms of the changes that we recommended in the bill? I want to pick on a few of those. First of all, the bill establishes a very structured process. It sets up scheme boards, which involves both councils and NZTA to design proposals, to consult with the public, that's really, really important, on those proposals, to consider privacy issues, that is also really, really important, and to recommend those proposed schemes to the Minister. Now, originally, the governance structure which was proposed was that NZTA and councils would have basically the same weight, but NZTA would have the chair. So NZTA would be dominant. And the councils when they came to us and submitted, they were very, very clear, you do that, we're out. They were pretty blunt on that. They said, we are not going to be beholden to NZTA, beholden to the government. We are partners in this. We need to be equal partners in this. And because they basically said, this is not just about state highways, it's also about local roads. And so we proposed, and I think that's had broad acceptance, it's one of the ones we pushed with the Minister, we proposed an independent chair appointed jointly and unanimously by NZTA and by the councils, and that's set out in section 65 V1D. We also made some changes to ensure that every council that has joined the process is involved, is represented on the scheme board, and also that some key points in the decision process that councils have to agree to or they don't proceed, the scheme doesn't proceed, and those are set out in new section 65 ZAC. So we've really listened very hard to councils. This is about treating councils with respect and working together in partnership. We've also said we want to protect the NZTA in case a whole lot of costs get loaded onto NZTA, and that's the addition of section 65 WCB, which means that NZTA has to agree where there's a whole lot of potential costs imposed on it. NZTA's got to be able to agree with that, or to say, no, we're not happy with that particular situation. So that's the first area of change. The second one that we argued for was exemptions to the time of use charge. Now, we started off with the only exemption that was going to be was for emergency vehicles. There was some argument that emergency vehicles shouldn't be covered either, and they should have to be subject to the charge, but the vast majority of people said, no, we don't agree with that. But the one, and we had arguments on the other side saying that things like freight should be exempted from that, but our view was that freight can choose to travel to some degree when it wants to travel, and it also benefits from having less traffic on the road. But the one we did argue about was public transport, because the whole rationale for time of use charging is to change the time or the mode, and public transport is about the mode. So we argued for that, and that is in there. Also, rural school buses are in there as well. Not that there's a huge number of them, but they're also in there. And the third recommendation is where any surplus funding, if there is surplus funding, and that's not the primary driver is about changing behaviour, but if there is surplus funding, where it can be used, the original proposition was anywhere in the region, but what we said is no, actually what we want is a much closer nexus between where the revenue is raised, the congestion area, and the area where it's spent. So that is included there in section 65X3. So, Mr. Speaker, just to finish off, I think it's been a very, very good process. I think we've got to a very good outcome, and I just want to thank everybody who's been involved in this, and it puts in place something in the toolkit that local government has been asking for a long time, which hopefully should save the country a significant amount of money in congestion and potentially in capital programs. I commend the bill to the House.
Okay, it's really interesting hearing that from Uncle Andy there, and also being the former Mayor of Wellington, and he does live in Karori, and Karori does have the bottleneck that Karori has a very unique peak hour traffic situation in Karori, where the fact that the town itself congests for about, it's 2 hours, but it actually goes on a bit longer either side of it. Basically, it's like, for me, like when it does do deliveries, it's like don't go there before 9 o'clock in the morning, or make sure you're out of there before 3 o'clock in the afternoon, because before 9 o'clock in the morning, you've got a bus every minute heading into the city through the Karori Tunnel. And it's the one suburb in Wellington where we can't run double-decker buses. And that's obviously where Andy's done there. He's definitely mentioned a lot of his points about being as the Mayor of Wellington. And yeah, he's got some good things. Time back use. The other thing I'm glad Andy actually has mentioned is physically is possibly about car park tax, or a charge for car parks as opposed to congestion as well, considering there are many companies in Wellington who are literally creaming it off there for parking that add to the congestion problem, but the rates they themselves pay could be the same as a retail building, for example. So it could possibly have a levy that, car park tax that could go on there. So going from a summary of what his speech according to ChatGPT, it says, it's about giving more control to local things, obviously. Council objected, insisting on equal partnership, which makes complete sense. And the bill to put an independent chair, which, unless you signed yourself up to the stupid Taxpayers Union pledge, you would be supportive of that. And obviously cost protections in there. NZTA does have a very good system in there, and the fact that they've added more exemptions into the system. But it's interesting there was a rejection for freight, which is interesting in that one. But I can also tell you for the fuel industry, they tend to make sure their shifts start and finish outside of peak times. So they don't have people, say, driving their 44-tonne tankers through the middle of Wellington City to deliver fuel. Actually, you find out in Wellington, most fuel deliveries actually tend to happen at night, not during the day. And I can definitely speak for that from BP, and also for surplus revenue to be reinvested into local infrastructure. Then that should be bus stops, bus lanes, reduced public transport fares, that sort of thing, or possibly even upgraded train services. if we're in Wellington. I do believe one person mentioned in here about, Catherine mentioned about how they've taken all the trains down to Dunedin. Great point. Could sit there and bring back the trains to Dunedin. Yeah, obviously got to sit there and keep it out there. I mean, with Wellington Hospital down the road, definitely sit there and do that. So let's kick off next with Celia Wade Brown with more from the Greens.
Thanks for watching. Make sure you're subscribed to our Facebook, YouTube, Twitch, Instagram.